Hi, everybody. Well, it's the 50th anniversary of the original Jaws, one of my all-time favorite films. Saw it at the age of 13 at the theater, and it's definitely in the top for me, the top maybe five films of all time in my list. And I thought what I would do to celebrate the anniversary is not do a review of the original Jaws. I don't know when I'll get to that, but I figured I'll do the sequels. I'll do a video each for the sequels and for better or worse. And I'll consult some old notes. This is a retro review, meaning these are reviews that I did a long time ago. This particular review for Jaws 2, I'm noticing I did on June 20th of 2005. June 20th being the release of the original Jaws. So actually, it's almost 20 years to the exact day since I wrote this. Wow, time sure flies. But I'm going to be consulting this back and forth as I talk about the movie. And I'm going to be consulting my notes, but I'll also have some fresh thoughts on it. Well, first of all, Jaws 2 has always been a really tough sequel for me to rate, and I'm always torn by it. The first time I saw it was in 1978 when it came out. Everybody had really anticipated it, and at the time, I was 16. I was the same age as pretty much as the teenagers in the movie. So I was the right age when you look at it that way to identify with the cast. But at the time, we knew an older guy in the group. We were teenagers. I think he was 18 or 19. The other guy, he was the brother of one of the friends, and he drove a car. So he actually took a whole carload of us to go to the drive-in. And I remember very vividly that the line was backed up for blocks, and we got to the drive-in, and by that time we couldn't get in. So we had to kind of go into a parking lot of a shopping mall across the way, and we kind of watched the screen in silence. We didn't want to see the whole movie, but we did from from the other parking lot watch the first show and had to wait for the whole movie to be over before we could actually get into the parking lot and watch the movie properly with the speakers and the sound for ourselves. Well, even at that particular age, I was very disappointed with the sequel. And I realized even at that young age that this was an uninspired cash-in with no real story and a quickly contrived plot to utilize a group of know-it-all kids, just like myself at the time, who are on a carefree sailing trip only to become fish food for the newest great white shark. And subsequent viewings of this on home video have never really improved it for me that much, but lately, it's starting to get better for me. One thing I always maintained either way was that Roy Scheider was exceptional in his return here as Chief Brody from the first film. He was one of the cast members to return. Also, Murray Hamilton. It's welcome having him back as the mayor again. We really miss Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper or Steven Spielberg, but they were busy with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So let's talk a little bit about this here. It was directed by Jeannot Szwarc, and I will say, even now, I still think it's got a weak script when I revisit it, and still contrived. But I've come to give what I call teen bait more of a free pass. I used to say that Jaws 2 and its teenage victim scenario was too much like a cheap slasher film cop-out, in the vein of a Friday the 13th flick or something along those lines. The formula: take a group of irritating kids, throw them out there as fodder for a killer, and tally up the body count. But then recently I got to thinking, when you really come down to it and analyze it, the now formulaic slasher fests were not even around when Jaws 2 made its theatrical debut. In fact, even the original Halloween, the one that started it all, didn't come out until 4 months after Jaws 2's premiere in June of '78. Halloween came out in October of the same year, so it really isn't copying them. There wasn't yet a slasher formula, but in retrospect, it feels like it. Well, as far as the story goes, a few years have passed since the last movie. Chief Brody is still on the job as the sheriff at Amity Island, married to Lorraine Gary, who also returns as his wife. Uh, Brody hears about two missing divers and then later two women who vanished during some sort of water skiing mishap. When he sees the chewed remains of a giant killer whale that washed ashore, the chief feels a gnawing sense of deja vu and suspects he's got a second great white shark on his hands. And then, by retrieving the camera of the divers at the bottom of the ocean and developing the film, Brody comes up with a photograph of bubbles and what appears to be the black eye of a killer shark. So once again, he confronts the mayor, Murray Hamilton, about his hunch, but is dismissed as paranoid, as usual. It seems like at the start, the mayor hasn't learned a thing from the last encounter. And then Brody's anxieties come to a head when he fires his gun on a crowded public beach, shooting up a school of bluefish that he mistakes for a great white. He then finds himself without a job, with two missing sons who have taken it upon themselves to go sailing with a group of other young friends against Dad's orders. Then way out on the ocean, the teenagers are being terrorized by the latest man-eater here, and their tiny sailboats are getting smashed, and at least one of their friends gets devoured. Even when a friendly helicopter pilot sets out to help out the kids, he finds his own aircraft being bitten and pulled under the surface, where he meets his doom. It seems like all hope is lost until Daddy Brody shows up in a stolen police boat and lures the shark to bite down on an electric power cable, which puts a fiery finish on this dashed-off chapter of the Jaws saga. Well, the real assets to the film are the director, Jeannot Szwarc, who inherited the project when original director John Hancock retreated, and, of course, the returning star Roy Scheider. As the director, Szwarc does a capable job with the script he's got, making many scenes much more interesting than they otherwise might have been. And Scheider had recently walked off the film The Deer Hunter, and Universal Studios agreed to forget about it if the actor would do the Jaws sequel, because Roy Scheider did not want to do this sequel for nothing. He really was not happy about it. Now, once the studio offered to count this film, Jaws 2, as two for Roy's contract, he reluctantly agreed. And Roy Scheider gives a very good performance despite his misgivings for this project, and he's extremely effective as a tormented man at odds. And these days, I want to say, I really love that about the movie. The one thing now, as an adult, that I really enjoy about Jaws 2 is all the stuff Brody has to deal with, losing his job, being misunderstood, and disliked, and paranoid, and living with the fears and the anxieties brought on by the first film mishaps with the Great White. All of that stuff really makes this interesting. It's a character study of Chief Brody. The stuff with the kids, the teenagers, that's all just there, I really don't need that, Even as a teenager myself, I didn't need it, really. The biggest problem with Jaws 2 is its script. As I say, while the whole business about Brody's nervous obsession is involving, little else is, really, Reportedly, Steven Spielberg and Jaws star Richard Dreyfuss wanted to participate, but they were committed to further work on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and rather than wait it out, Universal wanted to go ahead with the sequel at any cost, and what the price turned out to be at any cost was a great story. As it turned out, we got the aforementioned teens in peril approach with a film aimed at a younger audience. Jaws 2 is not without some merit. Some of the shark sequences are well staged. I gotta say that. And one scene that I want to be really, really clear about that I love, the best scene in the entire movie for me, it's an especially chilling sequence featuring young Ann Dusenberry as a terrified teenager found cowering inside her tiny boat after her boyfriend has just been eaten by the shark. That scene and the way Ann Dusenberry acts and shakes and stutters and screams, it sends shivers down the spine. highlight of the movie for me. Yet the film itself just can't compete with the awesome power of the original. Now, I say it's always hard for me to rate this movie. It really is. I'm always torn between 2.5 stars, or do I want to give it three out of four? It's somewhere there. You know, if there's a half, if there's a half between 2.5 and 3, maybe there. So take your pick, 2.5 or 3 stars, depending on my mood and depending on which year I revisit it. But something's always been lacking with the sequel. Anyway, thanks everybody. Those are my thoughts on Jaws 2.